Bem-vindos de volta. Abrimos a segunda parte da sessão inaugural, chamando Mike Hannigan, Committee Manager da TC 322 Sustainable Finance. We begin the second half of this inaugural section with Mike Hannigan, Committee Manager for ISO Technical Committee 322 on Sustainable Finance.
Thank you. This is just the formal part of the ISO meeting where I have to do a roll call of all the members, the national member bodies and the liaison organisations and the liaison technical committees who are attending. So I think our colleagues, hopefully they can hear me okay online on my iPad, and then I will just note who is present. It shouldn't take too long. It's just the national member bodies. It's not every individual. So can you hear me okay online?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'll start off with Austria, Bahrain, Canada. I just do it because it's just for the people on the iPad. So, China.
Yes.
Thank you. Cyprus.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, Mike, thanks.
Thank you. France.
Yes.
Thank you. Germany.
Yes.
And Greece. And I know we have India as well.
Yes, Mike, I'm here.
Thank you, Shalu. Italy. Japan.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Republic of Korea. Luxembourg.
Yes, here, thank you.
Thank you. Malta. Norway. Portugal.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. In the room. Russian Federation. Singapore. Sweden.
Present.
Thank you. Switzerland.
Present.
Thank you. Thailand. Uganda. United Kingdom. Yes, present in the room. United States. Okay, and then we have some observer members who may be here. Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Costa Rica, Czech Republic, Egypt, Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China, Hungary, Islamic Republic of Iran, Malaysia, Morocco, Netherlands, New Zealand, Poland, Slovakia, South Africa.
Present.
Excellent, thank you, South Africa. Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, that was the observer members. Now we go through the technical committees. TC 68 Financial Services, TC 176 Subcommittee 1 Concepts and Terminology and Quality, TC 207 Environmental Management, TC 207 Subcommittee 4 Environmental Performance Evaluation, TC 251, TC 251 Asset Management, TC 268 Subcommittee 1 Smart Committee Infrastructures, TC 307 blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. TC 309, governance of organizations. TC 331, biodiversity. Okay, that was all the mirror committee, or the liaison committees. Now we have the external liaison organizations. So we have ANEC, which is the European Association for the Coordination of Consumer Representation in Standardization. Climate Bonds Initiative.
Present.
Thank you. European Commission. European Environment Agency. Ecosystem Services Partnership. Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Perhaps not in this session. IEMA, the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. Institute of International Finance, IIF. Loan Market Association.
Sorry, present.
Hi, thank you. The SASB Foundation. Social Performance Task Force. Thank you. And Social Value International, SVI. WWF, Worldwide Fund for Nature. Okay, have I missed anybody, any organizations online? Yes, thank you. Sorry, they're getting double sound on the audio as well, so I shall. So thank you very much, and I shall hand over to our colleagues, Raquel.
Thank you, Mike. We will begin the roundtable Sustainable Finance towards International Standardization, moderated by Paul Pritchard, Session Chair of TC 322 on Sustainable Finance, with Franz Knecht, Convener of the Working Group Future Standards Development, Hayden Morgan, Convener of TC 322 Working Group 1 for Principles and Guidance, Pedro Baiz, Convener of the FinTech Tag within Technical Committee 322, and Bolu Wang, Convener of TC 322 Working Group 2 for Terminology, who will join us remotely. During the following session, we will have an open Q&A channel, and any members of the audience who wish to ask a question can access menti.com and insert the code 508-038-75. That is 508-038-75. We ask that you write your name, your position, and the name of your organization, followed by your question. No decorrer do seguinte debate, a plateia poderá colocar questões através do acesso a menti.com e inserindo o código 508-038-75. 508-038-75. Pedimos que insiram o nome, o cargo e a organização, seguidos da pergunta, preferencialmente em inglês. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Hello everyone in the room and online. And my name is Paul Pritchard. I'm acting as the interim session chair and also as the convener for this roundtable session, which will run for about the next 50 to 60 minutes. And as you've heard, the intention here is to hear from a number of the experts working across the main areas of TC 322. And after that, we will have questions and answers. So if you do have any questions that come up during the next talks, please feel free to submit them online, and we'll try and address as many as we can at the end. Just before starting, I did want to also extend some thanks, my own personal thanks, in the sense I'm very honoured to be acting as session chair here. However, I must say I actually deserve very little credit overall for the progress that's been made to date around TC 322, and echo the other speakers in thanking Peter Young in particular for his work, supported by Mike, Stefan, and of course all the other national bodies as well in achieving the great progress that we've had to date. I'd also like to thank the organisers, APEE and IPQ, for their support and for inviting us here, and also to Banco Montepio for their support and also for hosting us in these lovely surroundings in Lisbon. So thank you to everyone there. As I said, we're going to move to the experts to talk about their respective areas shortly. I thought I would just give a little short introduction in terms of my own personal journey to the committee and to sustainable finance, which I think will echo many of the things that we've already heard this morning from earlier speakers. And as someone who's worked for a long time in finance and particular within sustainability area associated with finance, one of the things that struck me for a long period was that particularly the regulatory framework about the financial system developed in parallel to but separate from many sustainability initiatives. And it was really only a few years ago, and this was referenced earlier, that there became an increasing recognition amongst the international and national regulators of the banking system, in particular the financial system overall, that issues like climate change in the first instance, but broadening out now, actually are interconnected to and have an impact on the financial system, and particularly on financial stability. So we have a bunch of initiatives coming out of that direction from the overall global financial system regulatory framework. Coupled with that, we have the broader societal development in interest around sustainability from customers, clients, and from the banks themselves wanting to act in a sustainable manner, and the various initiatives that those have led rise to. So I think we've had these separate areas, but there's been an increasing recognition within both areas that there are interconnections between environmental issues, social issues, impacts on nature, and indeed they can't actually be addressed by a single institution, a single sector, or indeed a single country. So the idea of achieving global consensus around standards on sustainable finance is absolutely critical to actually making meaningful progress, achieving the sorts of goals by 2050 that we all know about, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We need that comparability and consistency across jurisdictions, and I think this is where really I've been so impressed by the work of the technical committee, sustainable finance, the one that I'm involved with, but more broadly as well, bringing together experts to provide consistent, independent standards that are comparable and can be applied everywhere. So that's really my take on it, and I want to let the experts that we have with us explain a little bit more about it. First, I'll come to Hayden on my right to talk about sustainable finance framework, then move to Bolu, who I hope is joining us online. Bolu, are you there?
Yes, absolutely, I'm here.
Thank you, Bolu. Loud and clear, thank you. And then we'll move on to Pedro, talk to us about sustainable FinTech, and then finally on to Franz about the future development of standards. So, as I said, please feel free to submit any questions online, and we'll try and pick them up at the end as well. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Hayden, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Hayden, and explain about the work that you're involved in.
Sure. Thank you, Paul, and thanks for inviting us here today to talk at ESG Week. It's a privilege to be here with you. My name's Hayden Morgan. I'm convener of the working group, which is developing the Sustainable Finance Framework Standard in its ISO 32210. We've been working for about 3 years now to develop the standard. It's now at draft international standard stage. And I just also wanted to thank the members of the working group and all the different membership bodies that have contributed to the standard to get it to where it is now. I think it's a really excellent piece of work and very, very needed. And it does address a lot of the issues that we've been hearing about this morning, and some of which Paul's talked to, in terms of some of the challenges that financial organisations are faced with in terms of integration of sustainability and the global transition. Some of the characteristics of such organisations are, by their nature, they're globally diverse, they operate in dynamic markets, they have to be innovative, competitive, and they're often very complex organisations themselves, operating in a quite diverse and complex sort of ecosystem in terms of the products and services and their operational framework. So it's with these conflicting interests at the organisational level, and the standard itself is designed for practical implementation at the organisational level. A lot of the financial services are not incentivised for long-term sustainable outcomes at the moment, and there's a lack of common understanding in terms of what sustainability means, either currently and certainly what it means in the future. And a lot of the sustainability concepts we've talked about, climate change, biodiversity, resource use, are somewhat alien to many financial organisations. And so our aim is to bring that sort of scientific best practice into the financial organisational activities, products and services to have real sustainable outcomes. And that's what we've got, because sustainability is a multi-dimensional challenge, and it's a generational challenge as well. And because of that, it needs a multi-dimensional response. And I think the work that we've been doing in terms of developing the standard addresses a lot of those aspects. And just to give you an idea of some of the content of the standard itself and what we've been working on, it covers aspects around governance and culture, strategy and objectives, risk management and opportunities, stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management to make sure there's an alignment of interest between different parties, monitoring and measurement of actual performance, reporting and transparency is a key underpinning tenet of the standard itself, and also continual improvement. So how an organisation can continually improve its sustainability performance over time to contribute to meeting the global goals, the Paris Agreement, biodiversity targets, efficient resource use. And it is completely underpinned by activities and operations, products and services. So it has a real tangible sort of impact in terms of how the organisation sees itself. And we've spoken about or heard about why ISO is such a good platform for this. But in my work, in the 3 years or so I've been doing this, I can really see the benefits of the ISO approach in terms of the global consensus to meet a global challenge. That international sort of approach and the different experts feeding into this. And there's a lot of work to form cohesion around somewhat complex principles and guidance and harmonise that into the standard that we're looking to develop. And I think Stefan mentioned that ISO is a pseudonym for trust. And I've actually started to see that in terms of market engagement. ISO's credentials, it means a lot. It's underpinned by robust, consensus-driven expert view, which is what we need for sustainability. The standard itself is a core set of 7 principles, but it's integrated with key good practice guidance in terms of tools, processes that can be integrated at the organisational level. So I think whilst sustainable finance historically, or sustainability is lacked in a lot of the consideration for this financial community, and the financial community or the financial organisations potentially cause some of these problems, I truly think that sustainable finance can be part of the actual future solution to this. And so I'm really looking forward to completing some of the work that we've started out 3 years ago. We've got a series of working group meetings throughout ESG week. And so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into the working group members and developing that standard, which hopefully will be launched in the autumn. So I'll pause with that, but happy to address any questions, either on the standard itself or sustainable finance more broadly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hayden. That's a really good start to whet the appetite, I think, for the work. You did say autumn when you think the final standard is actually going to
So
appear?
hopefully, all things going well, we're looking to launch potentially at the next Conference of Parties for the climate in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is in November. So autumn/winter.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bolu, are you still with us online, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you like to?
Yes, can you hear me clearly?
Good. Would you like to introduce yourself and your own work on terminology, please?
Yes, sure. So my name is Bolu Wang, and I am the convener of the Working Group 2 terminology under ISO 23322. In addition to the sustainable finance standardization work within ISO, I also support the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group alignment work stream, and also the European initiated international platform on sustainable finance. Let me express my gratitude to our hosts in Lisbon and my ISO colleagues who attend the meeting on-site. Thank you for making this happen. So Working Group 2 was formally established at the end of last year. From Ad Hoc Group 1, we inherited a core team from 6 country members and a few very influential organizations, such as Climate Bonds Initiative, Loan Market Association, Global Alliance for Banking and Values, and the World Wildlife Fund. In the past 3 years, largely the same group of core experts together developed the first ISO international guidance for sustainable finance. That is ISO TR 3220, which covers basic terms used in globally accepted principles, products, and government regulations. And more importantly, the document presents widely accepted concepts used for three sustainable finance building blocks. That is principles, guidelines, and regulation, financial products and services, verification, reporting, and disclosure. This document has been an input to ISO's new ESG solution package in discussion. I feel very glad that I have a chance to work for another 3 years with these excellent peer experts. The final product of our group is expected to cover fundamental concepts, tools, and the vocabulary of sustainable finance. It shall be useful for resolving some challenges the financial world is facing, addressing the consistency, interoperability, and the comparability of important concepts in operation. This week, we will hold our second group meeting to discuss 4 subjects. They are energy resilience, financial products and instruments, FinTech and risk management, monitoring, verification, and reporting. Other important subjects, such as social investment, will be covered in future group meetings. It is our mission to work closely with internal and external partners to enhance the usability of our outputs. For example, during our group meeting in March, a guest speaker from Hong Kong Monetary Authority gave an overview of their work in promoting green and sustainable finance and needs of international standards. We will continue using this channel to strengthen our connection with ISO and external partners. For example, local and regional institutions in Portugal. My sharing ends here. Hand back to the moderator. Thank you.
That's a great overview of your activity. I just wanted to ask one thing. We will get onto the full questions and answer session subsequently. I mean, one of the things that I hear a lot is that there are broader concerns, not just amongst the customers for financial services, in broader society about issues such as greenwashing and how funds are described, and what green means or what sustainable means or what ESG means. Will your work cover those sorts of aspects? So it should, will it be something that will be useful to a broader audience beyond perhaps the finance community?
Yes, we are considering, these are very important pillars for establishing a healthy, sustainable finance system. And we have investigated the EU regulatory framework and the Green Financial Regulatory Framework of China. And I also joined the project team, which has supported the Central Bank of Sri Lanka to publish their recent green finance taxonomy. I think our goal and our principle of working is to make sure that our output will be useful for addressing these challenges, including anti-greenwashing. Again, we are a terminology group. The outputs of our group will address the concepts and critical concepts used in these aspects. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. That answers that really well. Moving on, Pedro, would you like to introduce yourself and your area, Sustainable FinTech?
Thank you very much, Paul. So yeah, I'm Pedro Baiz, based in the UK, working in technology for over 20 years, and I'm the convener for the technical advisory group one in TC322, very focused on FinTech. Well, first, what does this specific working group does? It is very young, it just was established a few months ago, and it has two main tasks. One of them is to gather experts in the area of technology and FinTech, RegTech, etc., that are key or are becoming more and more important in financial services. And second, and probably even sometimes more important, is the capability of liaising with both internal and external organizations to TC322. For example, I'm in regular contact with TC307, which is the technical committee in ISO focused on blockchain and digital technologies. But as you will see as well in the sessions that we have later this week, we are also engaging closely external organizations, like, for example, IEEE. For those of you who don't know, it's it's an American organization very focused on technology standardization. So that these two areas, obviously, what are we trying to do here, and why even talk about technology? I think we all have seen the importance of technology for everyday life. I mean, we're just coming out of the pandemic, and we were able to witness how technology enabled many of us to continue working while the pandemic was, rolling all over the world. I personally believe, and probably obviously I'm a bit biased, that technology is fundamental to achieving the objectives of sustainable finance. And the way I explain this is just considering, what does sustainable actually finance involve? Well, as we know, it involves traditional finance, because we are not forgetting about, for example, the importance of credit risk when providing a loan or a bond. That is still there. But in addition to all of that traditional finance metrics that were really much related to money, now you need to add all these additional data sets, around environmental aspects, around social aspects, around governance. So the amount of data, the amount of processes and procedures now that you actually need to perform to issue, for example, a fixed income product has increased by multiple folds. In fact, this is some of the things that the practitioners sometimes complain. They say, wow, this is, if my job was hard, now it's becoming harder with all these extra steps, all the extra checks. And the way, this is where technology can really come out and support all of this. Facilitating, for example, MRB, monitoring, reporting, and verification, that you can perform, for example, now from the sky using satellite technology and the power of AI. So I believe that there is a huge role that technology can play here to support, what we're all aiming to achieve. And one of the things that I've taken kind of a paramount in the specific working group is ensuring that we don't make the same mistakes that were mentioned earlier today, that Dr. Ma actually highlighted that. Obviously, because everybody's working on this, and this is a very hot topic, there are many organizations working on standards or definition of what is ESG finance. And similarly, it's happening in the FinTech space, and you probably have seen and heard, for example, around blockchain and this type of technologies. My engagement with key international organizations in this space is to avoid that we end up with 2 or 3 international standards when it comes to sustainable FinTech. I think, well, this week we'll see some of the examples. We're particularly focused, by the way, on carbon markets, which, as you probably know, thanks to the Paris Agreement, moving forward in the last COP, as well as many other things happening in the market, is really, really heated. And the use of blockchain technology and other technologies to scale and improve the quality of carbon markets is a core topic that we will be discussing during this week in this technical advisory group. So I believe, yeah, there is a lot of work ahead. I think technology has a lot to play. And yeah, I look forward to the conversations this week.
Excellent. I think we all look forward to that, Pedro. I think one of the things as you were talking there, I was reflecting on the comments that I made at the start about these huge global changes that we're witnessing now, and certainly around sustainability and how we address sustainability issues is one of them. But I think technology also as well is seen as a huge global trend that's likely to change not just finance but all of our lives as well. And certainly for those of you that work within the finance sector will know that there's an awful lot of excitement and talk about technology. And I was just wondering, it's great to hear that you've got this work to make those connections with sustainability that need to happen. Do you think it is happening, that those connections are being made, or do we need to try harder, or?
It's an excellent question, Paul. I think one of the things that when we tackle this is to realize that sustainable finance is a huge area. Well, finance in general is a huge sector, and that, for example, when you start talking with practitioners, people that does, for example, equities, private equity versus public equity, these are 2 very different worlds, totally different practitioners. Similarly, when you go and talk about fixed income, bonds, loans, again, it's an entirely different community, which sometimes they don't talk to each other even working for the same big bank. I experienced that, and that's one of the key things that I try to identify, recognize this, how finance works. Each of these experts have their own communities. Obviously, sometimes for the external stakeholders, they just seek the big brand, the big bank, but internally, there are many differences there. And in the area, for example, of fixed income, which is a very good example of it was mentioned today, green bonds and loans is one of those financial products that have become extremely popular. But for example, ISO actually have done a great, for example, releasing the green bond standards just last year. But you need to recognize this difference, and that there are very different communities in it. And for example, in the case of equities, we all know now that IFRS, the SSB, has taken the lead now there on defining what is a sustainable public company. I am trying to do, in the case of, for example, carbon markets that I mentioned before, we'll have, for example, here later this week, the speaker from IETA, which is the International Organization of Carbon, carbon markets. And that type of connection, they have a network of over 200 companies working on this specific space. They are actually in the process of becoming a liaison to. Okay. So it's that type of connection that help to connect practitioners with standards and really bring everybody to the same table. But yeah, the challenge here is recognizing that finance is huge. There are many different sectors, and each of those sectors, they work very independently with totally different organizations, and yeah, you need to engage each of them individually.
Yes, and I completely recognize what you're saying about the different sectors or subsectors often working and being quite separate and not necessarily talking, but you're helping to bring them together. So that's great.
In a narrow area, but yes, that's the goal.
Well, all of us are concerned about sustainability, so you know, it's a great topic to get everyone talking together. Thank you very much, Pedro. So last but definitely not least is Franz, who, if you could introduce yourself and say a little bit about international developments.
I'm happy to do that. First of all, as I said twice yes when Mike made the roll call, that doesn't mean that Switzerland took over German, no. But sometimes I have two hats, and as I'm also member of Dean of the German Standardization Committee, I took over from my good friend. Well, okay, leave that out. And my colleague, Professor Eberhard Seifert, got very sick, unfortunately, and he would have joined indirectly, and I just said, I make the presence clear. So, the second thing about, before I talk about me, which is not so interesting, I have to say to the organizers of this conference, I was very impressed by the speeches. So maybe, as my Portuguese is not that much developed, but as I was, you know, treated by my Latin pro in the gymnasium, and then I learned as a Swiss proper French and some Italian. I got along, let's say, about 60% of the essentials. Call it 80-20. And I have to say, this consistency of message from the president of the organizing conference to the minister of economics and the C, it's interesting, of course, that's your focus very much, and then the CEO and those from quality standards as well and others, there is a consensus, I feel, which is essential to all that, and I think this is really, that makes me feel optimistic about getting some inspiration for the rest of the week, for myself, for our work. Because, you know, one can get white hair, one can lose hair at all by doing this work. Chosen or not chosen, it happens. But we are still there going strong, and we try to do that our best. So I propose, Mario, you change probably this ESG week, and this works, the joke works only in English very much, to next year you have the ESG Strong 23. Because it is a strong motivator. By hearing your minister, this is something, he spoke about Bauxit and a lot of things, but he spoke about the social license to operate, the societal license to operate, which is not integrating these things in the small and in the big, is so essential for solutions. Now I get humble again, who I am. I'm coming from Switzerland, actually, if you haven't heard that yet. And I'm in sustainable finance since the last millennium, actually. I started my first job at Swiss Bank Corporation in 91, actually, having done other things as the first one in this job, then called Coordinator Ecology. It's a funny name for that. And I'm in this now for 30 years and happy, and see now it's like the fourth development. It's like sustainability in business .4 where we are in. It's take the minister who is here, not the minister for environment. It's the minister for economy. And I think this is that what motivates me most. Beside of the phenomena Pedro spoke about, the fundamentals Hayden is addressing what we are doing. So I'm in this area for quite a while, coming from practice, being a lead auditor for 2001, so involved in that, but I was never in the business of selling standards or making verification. But I'm now for more than 20 years consulting companies, finance companies, as industries in how to embrace these things. Now in TC322, I came in via 207. where I was active in 14,008. A standard you might not have heard yet. That's monetary valuation of environmental impacts and related aspects. That exists for 2 years already now. So just to say, ISO has a lot of these things which are actually practice, but are they practical? That's the other question. And that's probably the challenge we are in. My job in TC322, beside of serving as an expert, is leading this ad hoc group, this work group for future standards development, which means what are the areas we should address. And Pedro was also there at the first wave when we said, okay, what could we do? That was in 2019. And we said, okay, 2 things we do in standardization, or what we can do is we can find where is consensus and then say, is it possible to make out of this consensus of different players a standard which is globally applicable? Because we are here few. In work groups, we are sometimes fewer, but there are a lot of people outside of this room, outside of work groups, and they are not so easily, have not such a good access to the table. So ISO is about translating things that others can pick it up and do something in their context. Hayden used a term which was interesting, and it kicked my inspiration, was where are the incentives for the sector? Well, to be honest, for the occasion, I'm a lawyer, so I'm a little bit more on the punishing side than from the incentive side. But nevertheless, a good standard has stick and carrot. The stick for the management of an organization to bang it through, to make it efficient. I learned that at Swiss Bank Corporation, where I worked 10 years to try to convince we should have a consistent 40,001. No one said, well, actually, you know, for changing bulbs and collecting paper. No, to bring people on track that this matters. And then how you integrate it, it takes longer. That's for sure. And where we are now, it was just addressed before. But where are the carrots? The carrots are the benefits you get that you can attract customers, and they get the right carrot. They get a carrot. It was addressed, you know, this greenwashing problem. It's in every article you read out there that is addressing from green finance to green bonds to sustainable finance to la-di-da-di-di and la-di-da-di-da, and everywhere is sustainable. Well, the term got a bit woolly, you know. I think there's a term in English for that. It got fuzzy. And when you use the term too often in one sentence, at the end, no one knows what we were talking about. So we need to speak about management quality and impact of management activities. That's what organizations that are making money, making us happy, making us pay for good products, for good services, are providing. So a good standard is stick and carrot. Now, what we said also then, well, when we go into the sustainability issue where we had to accept, and I know this because I was at the first meeting of UNEP-FI, United Nations Environmental Programme Financial Initiatives, in 1992, last millennium. I mean, so all this is took some time. I was representing Swiss Bank Corporation at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We were half a dozen financial institutions there at the beginning. The rest was the oily guys, the chemical guys, extraction guys doing these things. And they told us what sustainability, what environment means. I don't come up with the joke I make usually. That's about the best solution for pollution is dilution. But leave this here. I think what we have to understand here, and that's our role at TC322, with what can we serve? To whom can we serve what? And the challenge is, of course, is to identify the audience that can use our products. So the guideline standard is giving the big picture. That's not made for those 500 companies that are already embracing it, but it gives a perfect frame for all those who say, okay, if I want to address this systematically, I can use this standard. But the other things are about, of course, solutions in the more focused area. That's why we came up, and it was just confirmed, and I'm the convener of this working group out of the dynamics of these developments. The next standard we start is work group 3, and it's called Sustainable Financial Products and Services. So how to describe what is sustainable in products and services. Now, of course, you know, you have a lot of tomatoes, rotten and others, you can throw at me. How do you know? Well, we don't know, but the market comes up with it. The market knows, the market develops, stakeholder bring in, initiatives come up now with tons of bits and pieces. 90% is talking about reporting, documentation, convincing, but you have to do this in a proper way that you then can document and report about. These disclosure standards from the European Union, what SASB does for financial markets. So we have also to make this distinction between is our work for the financial economy, or is our work bridging real economy to the financial economy? That's a challenge that's not invented by us. A lot of people that are in it know that. Pedro is a classical example because we have again and again discussions about how necessary it is to come at the very beginning with this new technological wave, call it artificial intelligence, that solves certain problems to deal with numbers, with information, and put it together. There is certainly a huge opportunity in that. But as I said, I'm a lawyer from education. I'm more about, well, where is the beef? Where is the motivation? In Latin, in studying law, you hear an old Latin saying, cuius bono, for whom is it? Who does benefit of it? So this question, which comes from contract law, is an essential thing. So that we say, when you make a standard, we have to say, okay, it helps you to do this, and it helps those outside to do their decisions in a better way. Yeah. So we come up now with this standard for sustainable products and services, which gives a frame. But more important is the second switch where we still work on. That's a standard for impact assessment. Now, those being in ISO, they know, well, impact assessment, there are a lot of environmental impact assessment standards already. But we said we need to come up with this close because the future is about impact assessment. It's not so much about convincing management systems and approaches that provide the things, yes, enable a company to do that but the customer, the market, society at large, ESG strong. So next conference, you have to have something about impact assessment. Well, how to make things really bring to the table, bring down to earth is, where is it? What is it? And describe it. It's easily said. It's a lot of discussion around. And fortunately, we have ici présent, we have representatives from social stakeholders to bring in these developments. We know a lot about the environment. We know certain things of importance about governance, of course, but the social area is that what is so challenging, but also so interesting because it has to do with real life. It doesn't have to do with bits and pieces and PPMs and whatever. It has to do with you and me, and it has to do with the most difficult thing in all this is with values. So how do you deal with value-driven concepts in standardization? Well, sticks and carrot work quite well, but then when you want to show where you want to get at, you have to go away, but you have to understand that every societal entity, from an individual to a large company to a country, is driven by these permanently shifting value schemes. And how to put this in a standard is mission impossible #7, perhaps. I don't think the last film was #6 or something like that. So
somebody will tell us.
So you see, we are going into the thick underwood in this, and we need to do this. We need to cooperate, and we cooperate with all the theses, 68, governance, asset management, and try to get bits and pieces together, because ISO is not inventing. ISO is bringing together. It's a challenging per se to do that efficiently. And as I said, we have management system standards and we have outcome standards. And I think sticks and carrots are there when we really have hard, what I call hard-wired standards. We need standards that can be assessed, verified. And that's the last thing you hear also when you read this article. At the end comes, we need to have more transparency and we need to have verification of these things that come up. So there is our role, there is our niche. It's perfect. It's not a perfect niche, but it's the niche we have. And we want to play, and I think we can play. And still to come and has to come. Okay.
Thank you very much. Eloquent as ever. Thank you, Franz. I mean, one of the things that you said there really struck me personally, in the sense of my own practice over the last year or 18 months has been around the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. And we're actually getting to that stage with lots of people now where they've looked at the impacts on the environment and they're trying to translate that into financial materiality, exactly the area that you've been thinking about for a number of years. So I think if I look at that area, people are wondering, how do we do this? You know, how can we learn from others, and what's the best practice? So I think there's an awful lot of scope to develop your work in this, and as well around the products and services. So that's excellent. Thank you. I am mindful of the time, and I think we do have an extra few minutes that we can run over to actually get onto the Q&A. And I'm actually going to try and distill it down, some of the questions that we've kind of got, and I'll put it to each of the experts in turn, if that's okay. And we're currently in a situation, I agree, most people seem to agree, that we've got a whole number of initiatives, acronyms, standards, guidelines appearing, national, international, particular sectors. So we have this lots and lots of developments, which is great because people are taking action. But is the work that you're involved with, and I'll start with Hayden on this one. So I'm thinking about, again, particularly my own area, but more broadly as well. I hear an awful lot about transition and transition pathways and transition finance, and also nature as well. We've got to mention it. So nature is coming through. Are those sorts of thoughts, concerns being echoed in the work in your own area, and can you build them in going forward?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely, and I mean the standard that we are looking to develop is a principle-driven standard, so you can take a lot of these concepts which are coming out there, and that sort of, you hear this term alphabet soup about all these different acronyms and making sense of it. But to distill it down to key principles is actually a really useful way to sort of think about implementation or integration of a lot of these aspects. And the sort of example you made there, within our standard itself, in the guidance, there is around transition plan, for example, because it's such an important aspect. And then in this context, it's not just only around carbon or greenhouse gas transition, it's transition towards a more sustainable outcome, effectively. So we look at an holistic approach. Well, I picked it up at the registration desk. But yeah, no, it's and again, whilst the SDGs are sort of got 17 specific outcomes, if you want to call it that, it's that holistic approach, right, to apply to an organisation or an activity to get that sustainable outcome that we're looking to, you know, the result. And then just going back in terms of some of the motivation we picked up on, and Franz and Pedro, I think you mentioned it as well. In my work with my consultancy hat on, so I set up a consultancy 2 years ago or so, specifically around sustainable finance. A lot of my clients talk in terms of their motivation is either sort of greed or fear. And it's fear of some negative repercussions, whether it's regulator, whether it's losing customers, whether it's being not as competitive, whether it's the opportunity cost of missing out on the green revolution, if you want to call it that. And the greed is around, you know, how much money can we make effectively, and how can we, I mean, it sounds slightly Wall Street, but how can we sort of serve our communities as well in that respect? So those are the motivational factors, and that holistic approach is really difficult to think about because a lot of organizations aren't designed, certainly in the Western economy, around that holistic approach. You've got defined silos of teams and departments working independently. And it's only when people like from our profession come in and start to break down those silos and joining up the dots is another one of my key phrases, and get that alignment of interest between long-term organizational strategic goals and what it means for their actual specific role. And it's, from my perspective, again, going back to transition, everyone needs to be basically having that alignment of interest right down from the strategy to what it means for their role. And that's one of the key themes from my perspective, and one of the key areas where the standard can really help to define that and help with practical implementation.
Fantastic, yeah. And I really love the idea of the sustainability community actually bringing these broader, bringing people together benefits actually within finance organisations in the sector.
Okay. And the regulators aren't really, they're coming to that.
Yeah.
We talked about earlier around sort of principle-driven regulation, where it's less around a set of rules, you shall do this, that, and the other. It's more around behaviour of individuals and values for that organisation.
Absolutely.
And then demonstration of those values as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Bolu, I mean, is terminology's changing?
Yes, I'm online.
all the time. Is this something that you're seeing and that you can deal with within your area?
Well, yes. Well, I after hearing what Franz said, I start to worry about my hair. So I want to give an example, just to explain, to demonstrate how the topics covered by each of us today can be nailed together. Just a few hours ago, BNP Paribas announced that it's going to provide a sustainability-linked revolving credit line to Ant Group, which is the biggest FinTech group company in China, and verifying the Chinese company's green credentials via a blockchain-based carbon management platform. So this put together, this deal and this important case put together what we've been talking about today. I think, and I also want to point out, if you look into the sustainable finance roadmap that are put together by the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group last year, you will find out there are 19 actions that are suggested by the G20 group. And you will find that there is an ISO row in it. For example, in Action 1, the G20 says Principle 6 is to address transition considerations. In Action 2, improve coordination at the regional and international level to facilitate the comparability, interoperability, and as appropriate, the consistency of different alignment approaches. And here, and it mentions organizations conducting relevant work, and ISO is obviously one listed there. I think we will be proud of this work. And within the terminology group, I think our goal we need to have some breakthroughs. We're not only working on vocabularies, we're supporting our colleagues in other groups. We're going to address basic concepts and the tools that will be need to be used to make a green financial system operable. So I really look forward to start this new journey with my group peers together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bolu. I'm really mindful of the time. I think I'm getting a bit too excited, and it is running over, so I know that. So I do want to get a couple more views, so hopefully you'll bear with us for a couple. Okay. Yeah. If could you, I don't know if you've got them, Mike, or you can. Do you want to raise the? Okay. Oh, okay. Fine. It's coming in front of me. Thank you. Yeah. So, the combined with the EU taxonomy, we heard a little bit about the taxonomy. I'm guessing that's probably going to be you in picking up that, Hayden, in the sense of I know it's been something you've thought about and considered, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the EU taxonomy specifically is around activities. The technical expert group have been sort of an informal liaison through the development of the standards. They have been involved. And like I say, there is some overlap, but it's the standard that we're developing is an institutional sort of level, organizational level standard. So there is a little bit of difference there. But we were really keen not to replicate and sort of reinvent the wheel in development of our standards. And we saw the work that was being undertaken by the Technical Advisory Group and the European Commission around development of the taxonomy, and we didn't want to replicate that. But it just reminds me, actually, because it's a good opportunity just to flag that we are developing an online resource with a whole bunch of curated good practice initiatives, which will include things like the taxonomy. So users of the standard and those organizations wishing to implement the standard can go to the technical committee website, have a curated list of all different initiatives and the sort of good practice guidance there. And that's a real key feature of the standard, and it will support implementation. EU taxonomy is one of those obviously key initiatives that we will include in that curated hub.
And there is specific ISO taxonomy related work as well, isn't there? So that would...
yeah, I'm not directly involved in that, but I understand there are some other groups.
Franz,
did you? We have standard for green financial products 14030 already in place for a couple of years. Now there is a part 3 called taxonomy, and this was is on the market now, can be used for a couple of months. Took some more time to develop it. But how do we, the question is about how do we combine with these things? When you have a taxonomy that is part of a standard, then you are bound to use this taxonomy. And that was the challenge we had there with green bonds and green loans, by the way, because when we started the work in 14030, I think it was in 2016 or something like that, the EU taxonomy was just, the idea came up, well, there will be a taxonomy. So what we could base on, Rob is there, was the taxonomy already in place and in use by the Green Bond Initiative for their product. So we very much based on the beginning of that, and then came the solution, then came this wave of suddenly countries developed taxonomies. EU, China, other countries. So taxonomy is left, right, and center. But for this area, political area, for this country, for this region, an ISO standard you want to apply globally has to be globally applicable. So what we did was, for those who want to choose a taxonomy in a country or in a region or in European Union, they are free to apply to the standard 14030 the taxonomy in place. Because taxonomy is a very political and a very legal aspect. Green bonds in the essence also to some extent, but in a different way. And for all those who don't have a standard or a taxonomy to be used, they can refer to the ISO taxonomy. And it is, of course, a moving target. Any taxonomy is not there to stay. This is not absolute knowledge. It is something that develops over time. We have the social aspects now, safeguards already before in, so trying to be practical and say, well, you shouldn't forget about the social outcomes of applying green technology standards. You know, you went through these discussions as well. So that's how we try to do that, and that's not easy, but that's the philosophy of ISO, is trying to make it open to the practitioners when the developments in certain boundary conditions are floating. But an outcome, hey, you can describe that today. An impact you can describe today. Whether the technology you focus, you declare as green or as social well-being or whatsoever, that is another process. We have even in thesis 207, we have a social life cycle analysis work group that came from environmental life cycle analysis out of it and tries to apply these principles. So that's how we try to bring these things in. It's not a one-to-one integration, but it needs to be embraced and absorbed by the users. Again, the user is the one who has to do the job.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Franz. Did we have one more question that we could put up? I don't know if we can put it on the screen. Okay. Oh, sorry, here in the room. Yes, go ahead, please.
It's on. Oh, great.
Thank you. Yes, that's
Hi, my name's Rob. I've come in from a long way to be at this meeting, but very glad to be here in person. So thanks very much. I've got a bit of a challenge question, if that's okay. We don't want to start this. Yes. Spark some discussion. So I've been involved in ISOs all the way back to 2004 when we created carbon accounting standards, which are all beautifully spread around the world now, and most people do refer to them. In this space in finance, ISO doesn't really have much of a track record or a following, let's put it that way, in the target audience here. So most people in the financial services world don't know what ISO stands for, let alone what it might be producing. How are we going to have some relevant outputs here? I mean, the 1430 standard on green bonds, as wonderful and complex as the 50-page document is, no one's using it. I don't know of anybody who has the intention to use it. I don't know any regulators who are going to adopt it. So how do we make sure the products from this journey actually get used and don't just sit on the shelf?
And I would just say, I'm going to go very quickly to each of the speakers, and I think we'll have to end on that. But I really... I was just going to say, from a personal experience, I would echo what you said, that traditionally, historically, I don't think ISO has had that level of traction that I saw in the sector. I was working in oil and gas before, where it's commonly accepted 14,001, everyone knows about, they apply it widely. I think it's partly what Pedro said about within finance itself, you have these separate work streams and they're very distinct, and they're very driven by national regulation and international regulation. And that's kind of been the focus, less so than, say, ISO and other. But I mean, Franz was saying about being optimistic, and I think I am genuinely optimistic that if I look at the work that Hayden's group have been doing, actually we are starting to get much more traction, and that regulators, particularly on principles-based regulation, and are really seeing that there are benefits to having these standards available to complement what they do. You know, they have resource difficulties, challenges around what they can do. If there are kind of ready-made solutions out there that they can use and are comparable and applicable internationally, I think they're starting to see. So I think it is starting to change. I'll start with Pedro on this. I don't know if you've got anything further to add, and saying we'll have a couple of minutes each, and then we'll wrap up and let everyone go to lunch, including online. So.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent question, and yeah, I agree. Because we just mentioned, finance is so broad, and especially, in fact, if we divide front office versus back office in finance, people in front office probably they haven't heard of ISO at all. But back office, I think, is a bit different, and I can give actually specific examples like 20022. Anyone working in payments and know about a network called SWIFT will know that actually SWIFT will stop accepting payments, international payments, after 2025 if you are not following 20022 ISO standard. So yeah, and I think that's where the tech front comes in. So because I had that problem when I worked in finance. I wanted to, as a very technical person, I wanted to come out with clear definitions. What is this? What is that? What defines this specific asset class? What does make especially things like security. What is a security in finance? Well, it seems that everything is a security. And then you start, but you can call it fixed income. You can call it equities. In that part of finance, yeah, it is very hard because I don't think they are traditionally used to following any standards, if you ask me. Now, on the tech front, on the back office, I think they have to. Obviously, sometimes the front office have no clue about what is going on in the back office. You just get this thing done. But I think in that area, I think ISO has an extra advantage over all other these organizations working in ESG finance. Because as discussed, ISO has experts like TC 307, for example, of digital ledgers and blockchain, which know of these other organizations, whether it's ICMA or whether it's IFRS, which is leading now internationally. They know a lot about accounting. They know nothing about technology. Let's put it like that. So ISO is the only organization which you can say has a big brand, recognizable, that has expertise across all this domain for technology and finance, sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's probably the angle that we could take. That's actually why I started to work so much on this, because it's where we are unique in that sense. And there are specific examples, as I say, thanks to the work of TC68, they already have a foot, especially when it comes to data quality. How to even, for example, call organizations. This is an area which, when I was working in finance, knowing who are you making business with, kind of a unique identifier of every organization. That's something that actually came out just a few years ago, and it came from the FSB, the Financial Stability Board. Yeah. After they enforced this idea that you need to have unique identifiers, and that it's ISO who produced that, for the FSB. And remember, the Financial Stability Board was the one that came out with the TCFD, just to tell you where things are coming from. And yeah, this is the problem. You have the technology, bunch of experts that we know and we understand, the need for standards. Yeah. While you have, the practitioners of front office that they sometimes do not so much. Because that's my view.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you, Pedro. Bolu, did you have a kind of final word?
Yes,
on this
I definitely agree with Pedro that first of all, it's which part within the financial industry you are working in, and second is which part of the world you're working in. I'll give you an example. Just a few weeks ago, Baiz have provided ISO 14097 certification to one of the biggest private equity firm in China. And also, I believe a lot of standard makers heard about the ISO 14000 standard, which is quality management. And many of consumer products and enterprise products, they use this certification. But if you ask people working for corporations, and if they are not in the quality management department, they are not aware of the standard. So it really depends on, what's the job, what the nature of a job. And fortunately now, I think ISO, sometimes we use the word transparency to refer to reporting. But here, and we refer to this as whether you can penetrate from the front desk, from the frontline business to the real content of the asset to understand what risk it has and what where the money goes is.
Okay.
So I think I am confident that ISO standard will be used. And also I mentioned about that in March, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority attended a joint group meeting. And there, as officer mentioned that when they do survey the world and try to establish the local government policies, frameworks, and standards, they do look at what's out there, and ISO is one of the directions that they will consider. I think we need to do better work as a HTC in improving our external stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
We need to, and I said ISO is putting together at TMB level a new ESG solution package. We need to align our work or try to provide inputs of our outputs, or try to provide our outputs to the whole package of ISO and find synergies with the whole group. I think we will be successful.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bolu. I mean, I think that's actually a really good point to start thinking about ending the session. I'm really mindful of taking more of your time than we planned to. So, and unless Franz and Hayden want to say something specific about the last one, I'm probably going to wrap up.
Really specific.
Okay.
Take 30 seconds. In terms of the launch of ISO 32210, there will be a sort of marketing launch and a whole bunch of events supporting that launch, which will include a lot of market outreach and engagement with potential users.
Yeah.
The other really quick point I'd like to make is ISO standards can become like a proxy regulation in a lot of markets, actually. So I see the demand coming from, especially in the less well-regulated markets, absolutely both the demand from regulators, but also organisations wishing to showcase their sustainability credentials.
And working with counterparties in these countries that they can apply standards.
Exactly. So,
brilliant, really good point.
Thank you.
Franz, did you?
Short to Rob, as we have this discussion again and again. Finance sector is about transaction and efficiency of transaction. A standard that works is not a quick fix. It needs time and it needs quality. What we see now is a lot of time used to describe things, but not yet quality. The nuts and bolts of sustainable finance is that it really bring that out what people want, and what people want is a soft target. It moves. So I think we have to be a bit humble, and I agree with him that we need to probably increase. Well, we do that all the time, or try to connect with these initiatives. And these initiatives call themselves standards. They're not standards. Just because something says we are the new standard on this and this and this doesn't make it a global standard. It makes it perhaps the consensus of the 5% driving 95% of the market. But sorry, by that you leave out 95% of the people around the world. So I think we have a slightly different role than a lot of these financial sector initiatives. And that's good, because they need to get the grips what they think is doable. But it is not a quick fix what we try to achieve, and it must last then in all its dynamics. That's it, Rob. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Yeah, an excellent question and to end on. And I'd just like to thank everyone in the room and online for staying with us. It's been fascinating for me, and I'd just like to extend my thanks to the 4 experts that we've got with us. I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting week, and we look forward to seeing what comes out of your work. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, and goodbye. Thank you. Obrigado.